going to introduce our award ceremony mistress of ceremonies, Miss Summer Dashe. Summer is a journalist and has lived all over the country. She's from California originally, but I think she's acquired a bit of a Southern accent over time. And she came out publicly as having POTS last year with a bang, with a news story that was circulated around the world because it was such a great storytelling kind of story that makes you want to share it and tell people about it. And that's how we met Summer. And she is now evening news anchor at WATE in Knoxville, Tennessee. And she finds every excuse she can to talk about POTS on air and tweeting, a lot of great tweeting. She's great on social media if you're following her. But she's going to help us host the award ceremony tonight, where we're going to recognize 3 really amazing individuals. And I hope all of you will stick around. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have a toast. And we're going to learn a little bit about Summer's really incredible story. So with that, I will pass it over to Summer Dashe.
All right. Hey, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
oh, good.
We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. All right. So I've got my sweat rag. I don't know if you've seen that on social media, but I sweat profusely. I've got hyperhidrosis really badly, like so many of you probably do as well. So I've got my rag. Got my water, we're all set here, and I've got some notes because I do forget things quite often. So I guess I want to start tonight by telling you about the night that that story aired, because I think you'll really like this story. The POTS story aired last year on November 13th. It was in our 6 o'clock newscast at the time I was living in South Carolina. And we aired it at 6, and I remember I was sitting at the anchor desk, and my co-anchor Trey, he got up after the 6 o'clock news was over, and he started walking away, and he looked back and said, "Summer, are you coming?" And I was sitting there at my laptop at the anchor desk, and I looked up at him a little bit panicked and a little bit overwhelmed, and I said, I can't come. Everybody has POTS. Everyone has POTS. And I had just gotten so many messages and emails and tweets and all sorts of contacts from people within like a 15-minute period after that aired, from people who have POTS or know someone who has POTS. And so I think what I want to share with you, the reason that's so important is because I have a really unique perspective on this, in that my POTS community is massive. I see that from that perspective, but before that story aired, I was just like anyone else going through this. I didn't really know how many of us there were. I didn't understand why doctors didn't know more, why local doctors, why I had to travel to see a specialist. It felt very, very lonely. And so that night, I sort of opened my eyes to all of you. And there are a ton of us. So please forgive me that I can't be everybody's POTS pen pal. I get lots of messages, and I love that. I mean, I think it's important. And I think it's important that we all continue to communicate, because we learn a lot from each other. So that's been really helpful for me. Some of you have helped me, guided me through this. I've made a couple POTS friends through this, which is just so neat and so helpful. So sharing that story was a terrifying thing, but also a really good thing in that sense. So what I want to share with you tonight before we get to the awards is I want to make sure that you have the perspective I do, so that you don't feel so alone, because I see all these people and I see all of you out there, and I hear from you, and you need to know each other exists. So I asked everybody on my social media accounts over the last few days, I had asked, what do you guys want me to talk about? And many of you said, please talk about how you're having a career with POTS. And that's a really good question. There are some days I don't know how I'm having a career with POTS, and yet here I am. So what I will say is I developed POTS when I was about 26 years old. And so I was working at WPDE in South Carolina. I had been working there since I was about 23. So when I developed this, I had the benefit that the people I worked with knew me before this. And I hate to say it that way, because it isn't fair that you have to have that benefit. But what I mean by that is when I started calling in sick, and when I started being unable to do certain things. And my coworkers noticed my hands were shaking so much. They knew that I was believed by my coworkers because that wasn't like me. I was extremely hardworking. I would work anytime my boss asked, all day, every day, any sort of hours. I mean, I worked mornings and nights and days. And so I did all sorts of schedules. And so when I started having these problems, nobody doubted me. And I know that's something that so many of you are dealing with, and it's not fair and it's not right, but it is happening. And so I had the benefit that they knew me before this, and I wasn't necessarily doubted, although there have been people throughout this who have wondered, why can you do something one day and not the next day? Or is it really as bad as she makes it out to be? Because, well, look at me, I have my makeup and my hair done, so surely it can't be that bad because I look all right. And I do the news every night. But you guys know better. You know that you can do those things and still really, really be struggling with these symptoms. So I had to be sure when I was looking for a new job, and I think this is important too if you are someone who is looking for work or trying to navigate the job interviewing process, is I was terrified to do that. I kind of made it in a point in my mind to go, I'm really going to be strict about where I go after this because I know I've got a good thing going here. I adored my boss at my last station. She was fiercely supportive. My co-anchor, I feel like he should win an award tonight because he really dragged me through this. I credit him with keeping my career on the rails through this whole thing, because it was so bad for at least a year and a half or 2 years there, where I mean, every day in the car on the way to work, I just go, I can't do this anymore. And my co-anchor taught me to handle everything with humor. I'm already a pretty humorous person. I like to make jokes. I like to make fun of myself. So it was really helpful though to have him, even in those moments where I thought, I'd just look at him with my eyes glazed over and I'd just say, Trey, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And he'd go, you're going to grab your water and we're going to go do the news and you're going to be fine. And then I'd laugh and he'd make some silly joke, or more often than not, a hilariously inappropriate Potts joke. Potts became the joke of the newsroom at the last station. And I'm so grateful for that because it made it comfortable to talk about. And my old coworkers, I feel like, made me confident despite this illness. And so that is something I hope all of you find. I hope you find confidence in your illness, or despite it, however you want to phrase that. They helped me do that because they made it okay to talk about sometimes, and they made it oddly funny and enjoyable in the suffering element of it. So handle it with humor, y'all. There's kind of no other way to get through this sometimes. So when I was looking for a new job, I knew that my work community had to be a really good one. I knew that I had to be in a newsroom where people were kind and supportive and where my boss knew what was going on. And so I wrote an article for a journalism entity called RTDNA about having a chronic illness and still working. And one of the things I say in there is make yourself worth your limitations. So I know that there are going to be days where I have trouble doing certain things. I know that maybe I will have to call in sick every now and then. But on the days when I'm not so bad, I have to prove that I've earned that. And I don't know that that's necessarily fair to us, but that's how I've handled it. And so that's why I'm sharing that with you. And so making yourself worth those limitations. So when I call in sick, my boss knows she's got to take a day. It's not that she's lazy. It's not that she's not trying. Something's going on and it's all right. I'll be back tomorrow. And that's how it's been. I haven't had to call in sick yet so far. I've only been here about 2 months, but little things that I think are important that you share responsibly with your community around you, because the other thing is everybody around us will get used to us, but us. That's something that is very hard, I think, that's been hard for me and probably is hard for all of you too. It's like, you don't want to talk about it all the time, but how are you supposed to not think about it when literally every minute of your life is affected by this? I have symptoms every single minute of every day. There's such a spectrum on this. I know some of you are unable to work, and some of you, it's just more of an annoyance. And so for me, I do have symptoms every single minute of every single day. So how do you justify this is the biggest thing in my life, but I have to remember that those around me, it's not the biggest thing in their life. And so for me, that means being educational when I talk about this, rather than just complaining or having one person that I can, like my old co-anchor Trey, he was my person. I'd be like, I just want to whine for a minute. Oh my God, I feel like I'm dying. This is awful. But to the rest of my coworkers, it was more like, if they asked, if they wanted to know, I was happy to share some educational information with them to spread awareness, rather than become an annoyance or a nuisance. Because again, it all goes back to it all goes back to earning your limitations, if that makes sense, making yourself worth those limitations. So I want to share another thing that I've read on a journalism Facebook group. Gosh, this was like 5 years ago, and I don't know why it stuck with me. This is one of those moments where I'm like, gosh, was that foreshadowing or what was that? There was a news anchor who was talking about, it was a group of moms were talking in this journalism private Facebook group, and they were talking about someone had a child with a disability, and they were talking about how to deal with that. And one of the women said, I'm going to reference my notes here so I make sure I get this right for you. She said, this illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I remember reading that and thinking that was so powerful. And I did not have POTS at the time, so I don't know why that stuck with me, but it did. And so that was one of those little guiding pieces of unsolicited advice that sort of got me through this in terms of the job process. I thought, okay, this is not my fault, but it is my responsibility. So taking responsibility for the things that I need to do to be successful, which is taking medication, trying to do my physical therapy if I can, or go swimming, which I think really helps me is swimming. Salt and water don't help me a whole ton, but water, I do have to drink a ton of water. So those are the things that I have to take responsibility for so that I can set myself up for success. And I just hung on to those words through this whole thing. Let's see, what else did I want to mention to you? The other thing is, going back to setting yourself up for success. When I was looking for this job, I was adamant that I could not take a morning show because I don't do well in the mornings. The mornings are really, really hard for me. And so I knew that a morning show was not in my future. And I knew that that was going to mean it was going to be really hard for me to get another job. I was trying to move up as a main anchor, which is difficult. And I didn't know that that would happen. But again, I was very strict about this. I knew I had a good thing in Myrtle Beach. So I said, if I don't get the right thing, if I don't have my work community around me that I feel will be supportive, if I don't have the right hours, I'm not leaving here. And miraculously, WATE in Knoxville had an opening for an evening anchor and a position, and I applied for it. And when I spoke to the news director, I didn't initially tell her about this. I kind of asked her about the schedule. I asked her about the responsibilities. I used to go out in the field and report a lot. That's something that I can't do so much anymore because I get so tired and I get so sweaty and yucky and I don't feel good. And so I talked to her a lot about that. And it wasn't until I had to address it that I made the decision to responsibly explain to her what was going on. And so that was when she said she wanted to fly me out. And I knew that I could not take a 6 a.m. flight and survive a full day interview and then, be okay and go back. That wasn't going to set me up for success that day. And so to set myself up for success, I responsibly wrote her an email and I said, I promise you, you will never regret hiring me. And I mean that. I said, I have this really unfortunate condition and here's a story we did on it. Thank God that story was nominated for an Emmy because then maybe that helped me a little bit. Just like, hey, also slight subtle Emmy nomination there and I have POTS. Please hire me. So I told her I couldn't have an early morning flight and she was cool with it. I was panicked. I thought, this is where I lose this job and this is really kind of a dream job and this is where I lose it. And I didn't. And so there is a way to handle that responsibly and in a way that you can turn it into part of your success story instead of a detriment to yourself as an employee. And again, going back to making yourself worth your limitations. I promised her she would never regret hiring me. And I live that every single day. If I'm going to go to that job, I'm not going to make her regret this. And I would do that even if I didn't have pot. So that's just a good way to go about your business. And then I think sharing, again, responsibly with your coworkers and with your community is important. For instance, the other day, this is hilarious. The other day, I did an interview with someone, a Zoom interview in the morning. And by that afternoon, when the editor was going to edit it, he said, "Okay, Summer, what was the interview?" And I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "Well, what's the file called?" And I said, I don't know. I could not remember who I'd interviewed that morning. Y'all, my brain is gone apparently. So I had to literally go out to my assistant news director and go, "Hey, Joe, what did I do this morning? Who did I interview this morning?" Ready for the punchline? I had interviewed someone about Alzheimer's and I couldn't remember that. So this is coming from someone who has a family member with Alzheimer's. I am not poking fun at that at all, but considering the circumstances, it was quite funny. So I've made it humorous in the workplace, and it also shows that it's not that I'm being irresponsible. It's not that I don't care. I just didn't remember in that moment. And so explaining that to them, going, "I'm so sorry. I'm just really not remembering well today. Please forgive me. This is too funny. Ha ha ha," and moving on. And so that's kind of how it's worked for me, and that's worked really, really well. And we just have a few more minutes. So before we go, I want to recognize that I know for some of you, what has happened to your life is horrible. There was a time for me where I thought my career was over. I thought I'm going day by day here. And so I know there are some of you watching this right now where right now you feel this is absolutely horrible. For others, it's simply an annoyance. Some, you barely notice it at all. But I like to remind people, may we never forget the other one exists, because we could be them tomorrow. And that goes both directions. So don't forget that. And finally, you are not alone. I know I touched on this in the beginning with all those messages I got, but you're not alone. There are still days, though, that even me, who has received thousands of messages, feels very alone, because there are days where you do go to your work and you go to your job and you're just barely getting through that day. And nobody knows, "Hey, Summer, how are you?" "I'm dandy, thanks, how are you?" And in my head, I'm thinking, I can't do this ever again. I'm gonna die. And that's a very isolating feeling, even for someone who has received thousands of messages. And I know that you guys are having those days too, where you're just trying to function and nobody knows it, because you put on your makeup and you do your hair and you anchor the news, and you wouldn't know any differently. And that's what you have to do to be successful. And that's what you have to do to get by that day. And on those days when you are surrounded by people and no one has any idea, that can feel very, very lonely. And I know that. So the next time you feel that way, I want you to know that there is a news anchor in Knoxville, Tennessee, who is right there with you. And I also want you to know that there are so many others. I'm going to read you just a handful of them. These are just some of the people I've spoken to over the last year. But these are the people who are also with you when you're having those awful, awful days and nobody knows it. There is a mother in Nevada. There's a wife in Spain, a musician in Nashville, a teacher in Arkansas, a daycare worker in Washington, D.C., a father in South Carolina, a college student in Texas, an actress in L.A., a soon-to-be nurse in Arizona. We are all with you. We're all going through this, but there are a lot of us. So I think now we are moving on to the awards portion of this. I wish I could give an award to all of us for getting up and doing what we do every day. So I would like to start by saying I think you all earn an award for that today. So I think we're going to go over our first award tonight is recognizing Dysautonomia International's 2020 Volunteer of the Year. This is awesome. Here to present that award is Kirsten Slowey, that's Dysautonomia International's Director of Events and Community Affairs. I love this award. Kirsten, love your background too.
Thank you, Summer. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us this evening, and I feel like the points you made were so relevant to our patient community, and your honesty is so refreshing, and especially encouraging the patient to share their individual stories with others. So thank you very much for being part of this tonight.
You're welcome.
I am so fortunate to meet and get to know hundreds of volunteers, and I mean hundreds of volunteers who donate their time to Dysautonomia International. Getting to know each and every one of you has been such a rewarding experience, and I truly am blessed to have this opportunity to know all of you on an individual basis. For this one particular volunteer, when her and I first met, we hit it off instantly. And truly, there's a bond between us, and I know I can rely on her for so much. Miss Lauren Bales is our lead moderator for the Alabama support group. And in addition to that, we recently, in the past few months, had reached out to Lauren to help us with some other groups here in the US. And without missing a beat, she jumped in and helped us right away. So she is incredible in that sense, in so many senses. We recently highlighted Lauren in the July 2020 Volunteer Spotlight. And I was so happy that we had the opportunity to share just a little bit more about the type of person Lauren is. Lauren lives in Huntsville, Alabama, and she is a rocket scientist. How cool is that? That is so cool. I love saying it. She's a rocket scientist. Her quote for the article says a world about the type of person she is and how she is always putting others first. Her message to all of you is the following: you will never stand alone. We are here when you are tired, when you feel the darkness pressing in and you don't feel strong anymore. We will be here when you finally get that perfect medication regime, when that test result is finally a good one, when you know why you're sick, and when you are able to return to the things you love. We will wait for you. I am beyond proud to present Miss Lauren Bales with the 2020 Dysautonomia International Volunteer of the Year Award. We're going to try and see if I can make this work. Okay, ready? Lauren, we're going to hand you a gift.
Thank you, Kirsten. This is the plaque that you guys sent me last week, and I love it. And it does have a spot. It does have a. I'm going to hang it up behind me in the office. Yes, and as Summer was talking, I thought to myself, yes, that's our quote from Alabama is, "You never stand alone." So I just want to show my gratitude to Lauren and Kirsten and the board of directors for selecting me for the Volunteer of the Year. And I just want to congratulate you guys on such an achievement with the conference. I've been astounded at the attendance that we've seen this year, the inspiring research. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for it. And it compounds every year, and the promise of the new treatments. I also want to thank our support group members. They're the best. Even in Idaho and Mississippi and Alabama that I work with, who helped me with the St. Patrick's Day parade and our local get-togethers, and I'm excited about any upcoming virtual meetups. So it, as Summer touched on, it really does take a community, and you never stand alone. Thank you.
Lauren, that is awesome.
Thank
Lauren,
you, Lauren.
Congratulations to you. That is fantastic.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
All right, folks. Next up, well, first of all, how cute was the gift pass? That was adorable. Nice job with the gift passing. way to make a virtual gift go perfectly. That was so cute, you guys. Uh-oh, I don't think.
Oh, sorry, thanks. It took a lot of rehearsal on that one.
Did it?
And I obviously didn't do it properly, but thank you for appreciating it.
Oh, I loved it. It was wonderful. Okay, so next up, our second award tonight recognizes Dysautonomia International's 2020 Physician of the Year. Here to present that award is Shannon Koplitz. Shannon is a member of Dysautonomia International's Board of Directors and the organization's treasurer. Shannon.
Yes, good evening. Thank you so much, Summer. Tonight, I have the very incredible honor of introducing you all to this year's recipient of the Physician of the Year Award. This year's winner holds a special place in my heart and has improved the lives of hundreds of patients, myself included. So, excuse me while I get a little bit emotional. I'm going to try not to cry through this. Let me tell you this story though. Shortly after launching Dysautonomia International's Florida support group, a few of our members mentioned a local physician by the name of Dr. Miguel Trevino. Curiosity got the best of me, so I made an appointment. I departed his office after our first appointment, elated. Not only had I met a physician who could properly pronounce dysautonomia, but he was also keenly educated on the wide array of symptoms, multiple treatment options, and the prevalence of common comorbidities. It was incredibly refreshing not to be looked at like I had 3 heads and told I was crazy. Fast forward to a follow-up appointment a few months later, during which time I mentioned to him that the Florida support group was rapidly growing and that the information shared both online and in person was astounding. At that moment, he stopped me and he asked me if he could attend our next in-person event. He wanted to come to learn from us. He wanted to listen to what we had to say and learn directly from his patients. Seriously, how many doctors do you know would ask to do that? Believe it or not, our very next event was held at Dr. Trevino's office with only 40 in attendance.